You ever just stop and think about your reflection? That perfect instant copy of yourself that stares back at you every single morning? It feels so simple, so normal. But the story of how we got that perfect reflection is this incredible 8,000-year epic. It's full of innovation, some pretty deadly secrets, and it completely changed how we see not just ourselves, but, well, everything.
No, seriously, just think about that for a second. What if you had never seen your own face? No photos, no paintings, no mirrors. How would you even know what you look like? How would you build a sense of who you are? It's kind of a wild thought, right?
Because, for most of human history, the only way you could catch a glimpse of yourself was in, what, a puddle? A still pool of water? And that image was always fleeting. It would ripple away with the slightest breeze, and it was never really sharp. Our own faces were basically a mystery. Until, that is, we started this massive quest for clarity.
All right, so this is where our story really kicks off. The journey from that murky puddle to the super clear reflection we know today, well, it was a long one, and it's pretty fascinating. So here's the quick rundown of where we're going. We're going to start way, way back, 8,000 years ago, with polished volcanic rock. Then we'll hit the Age of Metals, jump to a huge, secretive breakthrough in Renaissance Venice, and finally, we'll land on the scientific innovation that put a mirror in pretty much every home on the planet.
So get this, the first real mirrors, they weren't even made of glass. We're talking 6,000 BCE in places like ancient Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. People there figured out that obsidian, that black volcanic glass, could be polished until it had a reflective shine. Now, the reflection, it was pretty dark, kind of small, and a little bit warped. But hey, compared to a puddle, this was a total game changer. For the very first time, you could actually hold your own image in your hands.
Okay, so the next big step up was metal. Ancient civilizations like the Egyptians, Mesopotamians, and the Chinese, they all moved on from stone and started making these beautiful mirrors out of polished bronze and copper. They were way brighter, for sure, and they lasted a lot longer. They became big status symbols. Sometimes they even had spiritual meaning. But, and this is a big but, they tarnished like crazy. You had to polish them constantly just to get a halfway decent reflection. So that perfect image we're all after, still a long way off.
So for centuries, that's what we had, these pretty but flawed metal mirrors. Then, in the Renaissance, one city just completely cracks the code. They start making mirrors so perfect, people thought it had to be magic. But as we're about to find out, that magic came at a really, really high price.
And all happened right here, on this tiny island called Murano, which is part of Venice. It was this little hub of absolute glass-making geniuses. These artisans, they figured out the secret to making perfectly flat, crystal-clear glass. And then, this was the key, they figured out how to bond it to a super reflective metal backing. And just like that, Venice became the undisputed mirror-making king of the world.
And when I say they were the king, I mean it. These mirrors, they weren't just good. They were one of the most insane luxury items in all of Europe. We're not talking about just a tool here. A Venetian mirror was a treasure. It was a piece of art so valuable you could literally trade one for a massive estate. I'm not kidding. They were worth more than their weight in gold.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Venice guarded this secret like you wouldn't believe. The whole process was a state secret, locked down on that island of Murano. And the artisans, they basically weren't allowed to leave. Ever. This gave Venice a total monopoly, which meant that if you wanted a crystal clear mirror, well, you had to be royalty or just ridiculously rich.
But remember that dark secret I mentioned? Well, here it is. The ingredient that made that reflection so perfect was a toxic mix of tin and mercury. So the very craftsmen who are making these beautiful things were breathing in mercury poison every single day. This incredible luxury, this symbol of wealth, it was literally built on the suffering of artisans who got terribly sick and often died way too young from mercury poisoning. Just awful.
And that deadly method, it was the standard for over 300 years. It wasn't until a revolution in chemistry, not craftsmanship, that we finally figured out how to make a perfect mirror that was also safe. And that, well, that changed everything.
So fast forward to 1835. This German chemist, Justus von Liebig, has a total light bulb moment. He figures out how to get rid of the toxic mercury altogether. Instead, he develops a chemical process to stick a super thin layer of pure silver right onto a sheet of glass. It was clean, it was efficient, and the reflection was actually even better than the Venetian ones. And yep, this is pretty much the basis for every single mirror we use today.
I mean, just look at the difference here. You're swapping out toxic mercury for totally safe silver. You're going from a dangerous, top-secret craft to something that can be mass-produced in a factory. Liebig's invention didn't just make mirrors safe, it made them cheap. It took them out of palaces and put them in regular people's homes.
So now that pretty much everyone could have a mirror, its power was just unleashed. It stopped being just a tool for looking at ourselves and became a tool for looking out, for understanding the whole universe around us.
I mean, think about it for a second. Isaac Newton's reflecting telescope, it uses a curved mirror to see distant stars. Lasers, they need mirrors to work. The Hubble Space Telescope, our window into the cosmos, it's basically one gigantic, hyper-precise mirror. Science as we know it, from exploring space to looking inside the human body with tiny cameras, it's all built on the simple idea of reflection.
And of course, they're just everywhere now. In our homes, obviously, in our cars, keeping us safe. But they're also hiding inside the tech we use every day. That camera on your phone, it's got a whole complex system of tiny mirrors and lenses inside. This humble invention has become this invisible but absolutely essential part of our modern world.
So yeah, that 8,000-year journey brings us right here, to today. We went from a person staring into a dark, polished rock in ancient Anatolia to us looking at a smart mirror that can tell us the weather or track our health data. The technology is worlds apart, obviously, but that core human desire to just see ourselves clearly, that hasn't changed one bit.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to chew on. This whole thing started with a pretty simple, maybe even vain desire, right? We just wanted to see what we looked like. But in the process of perfecting how we see ourselves, we accidentally created a tool that let us see everything else. The farthest reaches of the galaxy, the smallest corners of our technology. So it makes you wonder, did we invent the mirror? Or, in a way, did the mirror reinvent us?